Wonderful, thanks. I think I feel like after Jean Lave's talk, I sort of wanted to redo this presentation, and so hopefully you can see why, and some of these musings that I'm trying to think through in my own research fit well into sort of the frameworks that I think we've been prodded to think about. In this conversation about applied anthropology, it would be a mistake to leave out its most debated and contentious sub-theme, the development anthropology and the anthropology of development. In polarized debates, the application of anthropological methods to aid work has been framed as possibly anthropology's evil twin, or in a more hopeful light, its moral narrative. This description of what applied anthropology might be was coined by David Gow, himself once an applied anthropologist in Haiti. While I was asked to comment on my dissertation research here today, given Haiti as the site for so much development anthropology, that is, anthropology conducted by individuals working in USAID or World Bank, I cannot help but reflect on the role of applied anthropology in Haiti in the years past, and specifically the very prominent role of so-called applied anthropologists in producing much of the knowledge on soil erosion in Haiti. Beginning with Alfred Metuot in 1946, soil erosion was etched into the development record as yet another arena of Haiti to be developed. Following decades later was the work of Gerald Murray, a graduate of this program who published a series of USAID reports on soil conservation in the late 70s and early 80s. Following that intervention, my own research would quite literally stumble across conservation measures that had been continually constructed and implemented since the 1950s. There's a lot of inbreeding that's going on here. It would be all too convenient to argue that it was the recommendations of anthropologists only that have shaped the face of soil conservation in Haiti, but that would be clearly just ascribing a bit too much to the role of research in directing aid ventures. Doing so would also hide the way that anthropological research on soil conservation in Haiti has combined with highly financialized forms of measurement to create the current context of soil conservation interventions in Haiti. So in this presentation, I'd like to highlight both of these productions as they influence contemporary Haitian soils and farmers. One, the production of knowledge through anthropological research, and two, the production of success through these highly financialized audits. I'll first think through the way in which Haitian hillsides and the very problem definition of soil erosion emerged from these applied social science debates. I'm then going to detail the way in which early conservation projects informed by applied social science attempted to use Haiti's collective labor groups as a site for wage labor incentives, a strategy that continues today. But in contrast to this early applied literature, I'll argue that the rotating labor groups in rural Haiti were not sites of wage labor, but rather have always continued to work for group rather than individual benefit. Such groups, in fact, see aid-based wage labor as fundamentally separate to Haitian group labor arrangements, making for particularly ineffective conservation. Finally, I'll consider the ways in which the repetitive nature of contemporary soil conservation interventions has not been kept alive simply from a devotion to early social science research, but rather through what must necessarily be a focus of contemporary research in international aid, the growing bureaucratic system of financialized aid accountability. Environmental degradation in Haiti occurs as a process of economic extraction. In addition to colonial resource extraction, the contemporary hillside sees two main sources of degradation: deforestation through the production of charcoal and the clearing of agricultural and pasture space, and soil degradation by farmers tilling hillside lands. Without trees or other foliage to hold back the soil, the valuable land descends downhill, aided by rainfall, and escapes into the Caribbean. And one other anthropologist quipped that that is actually Haiti's largest export is soil into the Caribbean, which you can sort of see if you fly over Haiti. There's these sort of brown pockets that spit out of all of the rivers after a rain into the very blue Caribbean. So Haiti has, in effect, had a soil degradation crisis declared by international aid since the entrance of UN development missions in 1946. These UNESCO missions were headed by surreal anthropologist turned applied anthropologist Alfred Metuot, who broadened the educational mission of UNESCO to focus on what he saw as one of the key issues of poverty facing Haiti: soil erosion. A key component of soil conservation interventions since that early point have been contour canals, a series of ditches lined with trees that are dug across the slope of a hillside. Implemented through the technical interventions of foreign development aid, contour canals can be seen throughout the southwest of Haiti as the supposed quick and easy fix to sliding soils. So, close-up view of these canals, right? The idea is that as water falls uphill, it's caught in these trenches, and ideally they would be lined with trees holding on to the descending soil and water. But beginning with the first implementations of contour canals in the early 1950s, anthropologists involved in soil conservation recognized that farmers were not adopting the interventions on their own. Hypotheses at the time for such behavior were largely economic. There wasn't an immediate payoff for digging the canals, and therefore farmers needed to have an economic incentive to participate. And once they did so, once they had that incentive, it was assumed that they would surely adopt such practices as their own. But after more than 60 years of contour canal implementations, farmers and their labor groups still do not use contour canals of their own accord. It is only with aid projects that such structures are built. So without farmer adoption and maintenance, over time these canals simply deteriorate into their former condition. And after less than 7 years, they revert to the same slope as before, as if they hadn't even been there. So these were some of those canals. In responding to critiques about U.S. aid policies of top-down development, in the 1980s, collective labor groups were seen as applied researchers as a way to harness participative group labor. Haiti's remarkable countryside agricultural labor groups were revered as ideal pre-cut community participation units. Using these existing groups for aid dispersal was not a strategy limited to Haiti, but rather was indicative of larger global trends in international aid. By introducing wage labor incentives for completing aid projects, these groups became both instruments and targets of development aid. Consequently, debates raged in the 70s and early 80s about whether it was ethical to insert wage labor into the Haitian hillsides. On one side of the argument, scholars and aid practitioners, anthropologists, voiced fears of contaminating local types of labor exchange and reciprocation. The other side of the argument, held by some applied anthropologists, asserted that these groups were already practicing wage labor by renting themselves out to other groups and landowners. And indeed they were. Quite regularly, a team of workers would rent themselves out to another farmer who needed peanuts harvested or weeding done. But as I'll demonstrate below, to examine this as wage labor is to impose a vision of Western capitalism and individualism on a system built to resist such practices. Group labor in the countryside is well recognized in anthropological literature and has a long history in Haiti. Labor is undertaken by various types of groups, each working in a collective or rotating fashion. They're called, most famously, the conbit, also the escouade and équipe. And this rotating labor is referred to broadly as une aide l'autre. One helps the other. For each day of work, which may include weeding or planting, the group works a different member's land. As such, no payment is exchanged, but rather the rotation of the labor group ensures that all equally benefit. Many times, such groups are rented out by a landowner to take care of large jobs, harvesting, planting, and weeding. As applied research has shown, the collective labor of the hillsides was and is the ubiquitous labor structure by which most of agricultural work is done. Because the smaller groups of équipe and escouade do sell their labor to those outside the group, anthropological research used in designing aid projects in the 1980s used this as evidence of how wage labor was in fact part and parcel of village life. Contrary to the portrayals of countryside labor, such research claimed that cooperative working groups were already using wage labor. Gerald Murray estimated that an équipe or a squad may spend about half its working time working for wages. As such, he cautioned development planners who were looking for romantic ideals of countryside labor untainted by cash exchanges. Recognizing that farmers would not adopt environmental interventions of their own accord and maintaining that wage labor had already permeated the countryside, Murray advocated the use of monetized incentives to introduce farmers to new practices, though he cautioned that such remunerations through simple wages were rarely successful. Still, this cash for work style became the most common form of implementing contour canals. Despite the semblance of wage labor, Haitian farmers in the Southwest in 2012, when I did my dissertation research, revealed practices that challenged the characterization of an individualized and purely market-based labor system. One early summer morning in 2012, I accompanied a farmer named Bekel while he supervised in a squad he hired to harvest peanuts on his land. I met Bekel in Lower Damon Valley, where I conducted my dissertation field work, and we took a donkey and 2 sheep to pasture on the way to meet the squad. There were 2 men, 3 women, and a female cook, and as the group worked, Bekel and I sat chatting. He explained that the money he would pay to the group does not go to each individual, but rather is held in common. Not only were these funds seen as collective, they were also held until December of each year. As he told me, the squad joins together their money and in December buys a cow to kill, an animal to kill. That animal is then butchered and the meat divided for the celebration of Haitian Independence Day. And any remaining funds left over are divided among the group members. Again and again, I was told by various members of these cooperative labor groups that the money received is not touched by members until December and that it is part of the group itself. Economically, they were not immediate returns. A keep and a squad members might get paid as much as a year away. And Bekel stated quite clearly that as an Equipe member harvesting peanuts, you are not there because you're hungry, but rather because you want to buy an animal to have a part of the meat in December. So as part of a cooperative work group, there's not immediate nor individual payment. Rather, the money accrued is placed in a communal account. And not only is that money dispersed at a later date, it's a collective non-cash gain. In the face of high school fees, the high cost of food, and unpredictable events like crop loss due to unforeseeable droughts and hurricanes, Haitian group labor overlooks the immediate hunger or material needs and maintains a perspective based on a collective future. This tradition, I was told, was held because those enslaved on Saint-Domingue, Haiti's name as a colony, were not permitted to eat soup. Others, including anthropologist Jenny Smith, have documented the importance of meat on that day, on the Day of Independence. So the soup and meat become symbolic of the privileges of freedom denied under slavery, denied the same food that humans ate. So working throughout the year, collective labor groups ensured that meat would be on the table of each member on the anniversary of independence, a powerful assertion of freedom and humanity. Glenn Smucker, another in the cadre of applied anthropologists who contracts with aid in the World Bank, described the countryside by stating that farmers are intensely self-interested, tempered only by special ties and obligations, and argues that there is little evidence of any community solidarity in Haiti. Another social analysis done by USAID regarding its agroforestry intervention propagates this claim. For good historical reasons, Haitian rural society has always been highly individualized. While event-specific cooperation of many kinds occurs in both secular and religious contexts, no enduring corporate groups managing a common economic resource over time have emerged as part of indigenous peasant social organization. I, along with Jenny Smith and others, have argued against this view of the countryside. Despite the continual enticements of wage labor through aid projects, farmers do not adopt contour canals into those cooperative work groups. Over my months of fieldwork, farmers repeatedly expressed to me that contour canals were a good thing, were a positive thing, and that they would help with the problem of soil degradation that they saw on their farms. But no matter what, no farmer would pay another farmer for such work. It was simply, as one male farmer told me, not like that. We, it was often said, do not do that type of work. Farmers often paid each other individually for a day's work, but these social relationships were based on more than simple wage labor, and were compensated at different rates and paid out at different times. Through ongoing interviews regarding soil conservation and labor, it became apparent that Haitian farmers saw not simply a quantitative, but a qualitative difference in the type of compensation provided by project-based, aid-based labor. Historian Laurent Dubois' work in tracing labor and land practices in post-revolution Haiti helps to shed light on the way in which specific rural practices and systems have continued. After the Haitian Revolution, the rural populace in Haiti vehemently opposed structures that echoed the exploitation of the plantation. The post-revolution arrangement of land and labor, the counter-plantation system, was an explicit rejection of the ways in which plantations worked and drew on forms of African agricultural organization and spirituality, as well as examples from the maroon communities of escaped slaves. Since then, individual landholdings have been the norm, and attempts to rebuild plantations by the Haitian government and the U.S. during its occupation of Haiti have largely failed. Despite concerns of contamination, rotating work groups in Haiti remain tied to the idea of the collective, as their practices and work arrangements go far beyond a simple monetary reward. And as Dubois' ideas highlight, these are often seen as frustrating aspects of Haitian culture and seen as an impediment to progress. But the work of the équipe in this squad is not only an act of teamwork in the field, it is a profound assertion of dignity, independence, and interdependence in the face of constant struggle. Group labor in the fields of Haiti is therefore not only a means to an individual end, but a constant practice of collectivism. But such reframing of previous anthropological research, applied or not, and such reframing of such research, previous applied or not, is perhaps the very real way in which qualitative field research becomes trustworthy and validated and shared amongst the community. Yet while such reframing helps to understand the recommendations of anthropologists of Haiti's past, it doesn't help us to understand why, given a farmer's reluctance to adopt and the ineffectiveness of such canals, the canals have been replicated time and again. The efforts of Jude, an agronomist from a community organization in the Southwest, highlights the ways that contour canals become successful. Jude was the president of a small community organization, and over the period of 3 months, his organization was contracted by the UN to build contour canals along a number of slopes in Leger. And as executive director, he worked to ensure that projects were completed successfully so that his organization could then receive more projects, pay its staff, and continue to survive. But their project didn't go as planned. Because of the heavy drought during the summer of 2012, many of the seedlings that lined the canal died after they were planted. And after the end of that 3-month cycle, a representative of the UN agency inspected the work. Upon seeing dead seedlings, the inspecting agent declared that the organization had not sufficiently completed the terms of the project. As a result, they were denied the final 10% of the project funding that would have stayed in their bank account. But Jude really needed that money to pay off the debts and to supply his organization with an ongoing funding stream. So in an effort to reclaim the last 10% of his funding, he was intent on producing a successful project. Jude invited me on a tree planting trip in which we were to replace some of the seedlings that had been earlier planted along canals. And over the course of 2 days of replanting, it became apparent that our efforts were very strategically driven. As we stood planting and chatting on the hillsides, seedlings in hand, Jude pointed out that we were planting in visible places. He told the community partnership, or the community organization that was partnering with him, that they should, quote, focus on the visible areas next to roads. He said they would only be continuing to monitor these roadside areas. So the replanting intervention was positioned not for environmental impact and continuity, but for rather the continuity of the project. After many attempts, Jude finally persuaded the UN agency to reevaluate the work. In early September, Jude called me with good news. When the UN agency saw the freshly planted trees, they changed their assessment. The project was no longer a failure, but over a number of weeks had newly become a success. And the UN consequently gave Jude and his organization the final 10% of project funding. Do I have like 2 minutes?
1.
I have 1 minute. It's great. No, this is good. So, in conclusion, I've outlined here the way in which both anthropological research and bureaucratic systems of accountability have influenced the contemporary Haitian hillsides. This research raises questions that must be considered by contemporary applied anthropological researchers. First, what is our relationship to previous waves of applied anthropology and anthropology that, like our own, is both informative and problematic? Second, how do we effectively engage organizations and institutions with this type of work? In my few applied ventures where I've been asked by an organization to conduct a study, I've had the good fortune to be able to reframe the question itself, moving away from terms like culture of poverty to produce a research project that critically examines the very assumptions that underpin the organization's research and function. Drawing on the past 30 years of anthropology of development and learning from mentors in the conservation field, such as Dr. West, I believe that the strength of contemporary anthropology is in its ability to adopt not the existing framing of the problem of the organization, but rather to query the actions and processes of the organization as well. Focusing on bureaucratic requirements of aid and critically analyzing the theoretical assumptions made by organizations can perhaps be dangerous in terms of successful contract completion. But by reframing these questions and assumptions will be what sets apart rigorous contemporary anthropological research. Thank you. Subtheme, the development anthropology and the anthropology of development. In polarized debates, the application of anthropological methods to aid work has been framed as possibly anthropology's evil twin, or in a more hopeful light, its moral narrative. This description of what applied anthropology might be was coined by David Gow, himself once an applied anthropologist in Haiti. While I was asked to comment on my dissertation research here today, given Haiti as the site for, argue that it was the recommendations of anthropologists only that have shaped the face of soil conservation in Haiti. But that would be clearly just ascribing a bit too much to the role of research in directing aid ventures. Doing so would also hide the way that anthropological research on soil conservation in Haiti has combined with highly financialized forms of measurement to create the current context of soil conservation interventions in Haiti. Of Haiti to be developed. Following decades later was the work of Gerald Murray, a graduate of this program who published a series of USAID reports on soil conservation in the late 70s and early 80s. Following that intervention, my own research would quite literally stumble across conservation measures that had been continually constructed and implemented since the 1950s. There's a lot of inbreeding that's going on here. It would be all too convenient to... Wonderful, thanks. I think I feel like after Jean Lave's talk, I sort of wanted to redo this presentation, and so hopefully you can see why, and some of these musings that I'm trying to think through in my own research fit well into sort of the frameworks that I think we've been prodded to think about. In this conversation about applied anthropology, it would be a mistake to leave out its most debated and contentious so much development anthropology, that is anthropology conducted by individuals working in USAID or World Bank. I cannot help but reflect on the role of applied anthropology in Haiti in the years past, and specifically the very prominent role of so-called applied anthropologists in producing much of the knowledge on soil erosion in Haiti. Beginning with Alfred Metuot in 1946, soil erosion was etched into the development record as yet another arena